A viewer asked about endogenous retroviruses. Now, evolutionists appeal to endogenous retroviruses as powerful evidence for common descent and evolution. So what are these? They belong to a larger category known as transposable elements. Transposable elements are genetic elements that can move around in the genome, can insert themselves, sit there, usually considered to be junk or junky. They don't really do anything, or they might even be harmful. But there's similar, you find similar transposable elements such as these retroviruses between different species. When I say similar, I mean a similar retrovirus in a similar location in the genome. So the chimpanzee and the human might share some retroviruses. These endogenous retroviruses look to be similar, the same retrovirus in the same location. How can you explain that? This is powerful evidence for evolution and common descent. So say the evolutionists. So why is this? So consider an analogy to a homework assignment. You're a teacher, you have an essay that you assign, you collect the essays, you get them back from the students. And some students have some typos in their homework assignments, and they have the same typo in the same location, the same word. What does that tell you? It looks like there was some cheating going on. There's a common source here. Someone was sharing his or her essay with the other students. So that's the argument here, that you find these typos in the genome and similar location, similar typo, and it tells you that there's a common origin, a common source. These are not independently created genomes. They are inherited. There's a common ancestor contributing to these endogenous retroviruses or other transposable elements. So this is the shared error argument. It is a type of argument in a broader category than that is the utilitarianism category. I'm not going to get into that in this video. That's for another video, which I'll do. But it is the whole utilitarian category is a religious category of argument. There are religious premises that are crucial to all of the utilitarian arguments. Darwin committed his theory. He was a committed utilitarian. He said so in his Origin of Species, chapter 6, and explained that his theory was contingent on utilitarianism. And you might be wondering, well, wait a minute, utilitarianism, that's a theory of ethics from Jeremy Bentham and John Gay and those guys in the 18th century. So this is a bigger discussion beyond the scope of this video, but utilitarianism was much broader than simply a system of ethics. So I'm not going to get into that here. There'll be another video. But there are several problems, first of all, with this argument that we just need to be aware of. This argument that endogenous retroviruses or transposable elements in general, these junky transposable elements that might be doing harm, they're certainly not doing much good, it appears, although maybe. But there's these junky elements lying around in similar locations. It doesn't indicate how they evolved in the first place. For example, nothing about this shared error argument helps us to understand how did retroviruses evolve in the first place. And viruses have a lot of have proteins. How did these proteins evolve? Just as an example, how did the whole virus evolve? None of that is explained here. It doesn't help us understand. There's no reason to think, oh wow, yeah, now we understand how it evolved. That doesn't come from this argument. It doesn't come from this evidence. In fact, it's unlikely on evolution. In other words, the evidence is unlikely. These data of these retroviruses lying around aren't doing any good, could be doing some harm. If that's the case, the evidence is not likely under evolution, because evolution, what? Natural selection is always driving toward differential reproduction. You need to have more progeny. That's what makes natural selection work. That's what natural selection is about, not producing junky things. So we're not enhancing the likelihood of evolution with this evidence. So what's going on here? In fact, it's not a prediction of evolution. Imagine if there were no retroviruses. The retroviruses were never discovered in our genomes. No similar retroviruses between species. Evolutionists would not lose a step. It would be no problem for evolutionists. So it's not some sort of a crucial prediction that evolution lives or dies on. So why is this powerful evidence for evolution in the first place? This is where we get into the religious aspect. And the way to understand this is to look at an example that isn't junky. So let's just look at an example. I'll pull one out, the citric acid cycle. It is a metabolic pathway. You can find it in many species. It's in the chimpanzee. It's in the human. It's very similar. It uses similar genes, does similar things. It's creating ATP from the carbon-carbon bonds, and it's very important. Is this evidence for common descent? Is this evidence for evolution? Well, yes. Anytime you have a similarity between species, it's going to be evidence for common descent, evidence for evolution. But it's not touted as powerful evidence like the retroviruses are. It's not touted as this slam dunk, oh, well, now evolution is just proven. It's no question about it. And why is that? So what is the difference between things like the citric acid cycle, which are fantastically efficient and work great, and things like transposable elements that don't work very well? Well, that's it. That's the difference, is one's junky and one is not junky. We humans look at all of the alternatives. So we've got evolutionary theory. What's the alternative? Well, it was designed. It was created. Call it intelligent design, call it natural theology, call it creationism, whatever you want to call it. This is the alternative, that the structure was created. It was designed. Since we have something that works really well and is efficient, like the citric acid cycle, it's like, yeah, okay, that maybe that was designed. That's plausible. But the retroviruses, endogenous retroviruses, no, I don't think so. No, that would not have been designed. And so there's the power of the argument. And philosopher Elliot Sober has pointed this out in great detail. The power of the argument is not that it makes evolution more likely on the evidence, or the evidence is more likely under evolution. It's rather that it is highly unlikely under the alternative. So if you're weighing your theory versus the other guy's theory just went way down and is much less likely at this point, because you don't believe that it would have been intended. This is a very powerful argument, just as evolutionists say it is. If it is true that it reduces the chances, the likelihood of design, then yeah, evolution is greatly enhanced. Common descent is greatly enhanced. It's much more likely to be true. But there's the rub. How do we know that it's less likely under a designer, under a creator? So the question you should be asking is, what experiment can I perform to conclude that, to verify that, to validate that, to confirm that? And there is none. There's no scientific experiment here, and that's why this is not science. So what is it? It's metaphysics, religion, theology, call it what you want. It's not science. It involves theological assumptions about what a designer would and would not do. And so it's very powerful, but it's not scientific. Now, I've explained this to many different evolutionists, and they never get it. They are in denial about this. Jerry Cohen's book on evolution, Why Evolution is True, is full of these arguments entailing metaphysical, theological assumptions. And he just doesn't get it at all. Just right over his head. He thinks this is all science. What are you talking about? This is just science. There's no metaphysics here. There's no religion here. So it is a religious argument, but what's more scary about this, more dangerous about this, is that it is deceptive. It is not perceived as a religious argument. It's perceived as having the high ground of objective scientific inquiry. This is just a scientific result. If you disagree, you must have some sort of religious axe to grind. And Cohen has said that in public talks. If you don't agree with this, you've got some sort of religious considerations at hand. Well, no, I don't have any religious considerations here. You're the one, Cohen, you're the one, Jerry, who has the religious considerations at hand. It's all through your book. I'm just going by the science. I'm not a creationist. This isn't my religious beliefs are not playing a role here. This is about science. This endogenous retrovirus evidence is a good example of why evolution is a religious theory, and it makes it very powerful. But it isn't science. This is religion. So is it evidence for evolution? Yes, it is evidence for evolution. It's evidence for common descent. Is it a valid argument? Yes, it's a valid argument. But is it sound? No, this is not a scientifically sound argument. It relies on religious premises. So it is a religious argument. Religion is very powerful, and this is a powerful evidence for evolution. It's not scientific. It's not a scientific argument. It is not a scientific evidence for evolution. Religion drives science, and it matters.